Good evening, all you movers and shakers and indie art makers. This is J. Michaels in the Passion Pit. We are approaching Halloween, ladies and gentlemen, and In the Dark, the special section of my podcast that examines the macabre movers and shakers of indie film and stage, has several storytellers to enthrall you. First, we have Kat Parker, artistic director of Articulate Theater Company, and she has a production of Doctor Frankenstein, opening in New York. Then we have Chris Williams. He's created a web series more frightening than anything else. It combines the elements of horror with racism and prejudice. Then we have filmmakers Marcus Slabine and Jeremiah Kipp, and they will share with us about their latest indie horror films and how they connect to the real horrors out there. We'll hear from Kat right after this.
You'd like to attend more live performances, but who knows which shows are worth the time, money, and hassle? At Applaud, you'll find unbiased 2 or 3 minute video reviews that make the decision easy. Use offer code JAY, that's J-A-Y, by December 31st, 2019, for 6 months free unlimited access, a $59 value. Sign up now at Applaud.com. That's OPPLAUD.com.
In the Passion Pit also welcomes a new sponsor to the program, DLW Photography. That stands for Dan Lane Williams Photography, that is. Dan Lane is a brilliant photographer with years of experience as a photographer and as an actor. Why is that important? Because he understands what you want in photos. Headshots, press shots, archive shots. His acumen and understanding turns out compelling imagery sure to get that gig or that listing and make a dream come true. And he also photographs life events as well. So get him to do your headshot, then the press shot for the show it gets you, and then your wedding, since the producer will fall in love with you. Visit www.dlwphotographynyc, one big word, .com, and tell them Jay sent you.
Hello.
Hello, Kat Parker.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. This is Jay Michaels. If I'm on the line, you're on the air.
Hurrah, my second favorite place to be.
Congratulations, and we meet again. I think I know what's first, and we're going to talk about what's first.
Yay!
Congratulations on it. I am utterly thrilled on so many different levels. Dr. Frankenstein. Ah!
Hurrah!
And this
is wonderful.
This is a new play.
It absolutely is. You would think that there couldn't be a new perspective on Dr. Frankenstein and his tale, but George Allison has found one, surprisingly, and it's really an amazing new perspective. I can't wait for people to see it.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy on saying you can't believe that there's a new perspective. I'm now called a horror historian thanks to a television show I'm part of. And I have seen Frankenstein go from Thomas Edison's silent film to Boris Karloff, all the way through to Andy Warhol and beyond. What's new? What's interesting about George Allison's Doctor Frankenstein?
This is the story of the real Victor Frankenstein. So it's not anybody else's story. It's about what happened to the poor doctor whose name was Victor Frankenstein when Mary Shelley's book was originally published. I mean, can you imagine reading that story and then having to pick between seeing a Dr. Smith or Dr. Victor Frankenstein? Yeah. His job went right down.
Is this based on a true story? Is this based on any kind of facts in any way?
It's based on many facts. Woven together with poetic license.
Oh, that's great! Oh my gosh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we get to hear about his mentor, Dr. James Lind, who was a who was the doctor to the royal household back in the day, in these early 1820s. He was his cousin, who was also named James Lynn, because things weren't as original, I guess, solved scurvy on the high seas. These were all very real people, and all that is woven into George's play.
This is so fascinating because the great monster's counterpart, Dracula, the whole notion of Dracula changed once we all understood who Vlad the Impaler was. So, wow, you stand the chance of changing an entire genre now, because Frankenstein will now be something new if we actually have a human being to look at in terms of this.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
I just love it.
So yeah, you'd think there's nothing new. No, I always knew there was something, and you found something quite brilliant. The true story, if you will.
Well, George found something brilliant, and I found George. So I'll take secondary credit for it.
Take the credit. There you go. And speaking of credit, tell our listeners about Articulate Theater Company, how this play works with what you do and the magic that you create.
Well, Articulate, sort of, I don't know what you call it, our log line maybe is the right terminology, but it is myth, magic, and the mundane. So what we like to do is take stories that have either a mythical element to it that has been brought down to the mundane human level, where we all live day to day, or you take a mundane story and just rise it up to the level of mythic proportions. And this story just fits that bill to a T, because the story that we all think we know and love about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is just the very definition of an epic story. It has been around for so long in our social mythology at every level. Even people who have never read the book or seen a movie think they know that story because it's so much a part of our understanding.
Oh, of course.
And yet this story brings it down to the very human, mundane level of a man who's just trying to survive in his time frame, and then gets blown up by their version of social media at the time.
Oh, indeed.
He does something, and somebody else takes those facts and blows it way out of proportion and tells a billion people, and everything good he had ever done is blown straight out of the water.
I hear the term all the time, magical realism, as a new style of theater, if you will. And it sounds to me like Articulate does this by putting amazing things into details that we never would imagine would be real or whatever, or vice versa, showing us how accessible the wildest of fantasies could possibly be. It sounds like Doctor Frankenstein fits that bill just perfectly.
Articulate is heavily influenced by Circle Rep Theater, Marshall Mason and his entire, I'm going to say crew, but it just went so far beyond that. And of course that was with Lanford Wilson, who kind of coined the term, his plays coined the term of magical realism. So I'm honored that you would equate that with us. And I think that everybody involved with us really loves the element of theatrical magic that good theater can bring. Film is wonderful in its own right, but it can't do what theater can do, and that's involving the audience directly and bringing them a structure with which to hang their hat on and to hang their imagination on, and they help us build that world. And of course, we start doing everything we can on the stage itself. But then we also are updated because, obviously Frankenstein is about technology and pushing the limits of technology. And so the people who are involved with this now, what you'll see on the stage is also an advancement of technology, the projections and videos and interesting use of light. And this is a developmental run, I should say. And so our hopes for our next level, when we get a little bit more weight behind it, is to explore some augmented reality vision to be able to use in the play, so that people who are out in the audience actually see a little bit more than they can see right in front of them with their own eyes.
Oh, that's so cool. What's the obstacles? What's the obstacles in this? I'm a horror movie lover, as you know. I adore the genre, so I'm fascinated by every part of your production. What's the obstacles in putting Dr. Frankenstein on stage?
I think one obstacle or challenge maybe is a better word for me anyway is the fact that everybody thinks they know the story. You know, when we say things about Dr. Frankenstein, we always add the little tagline of "What if Mary Shelley got it wrong?" on purpose, because we want people to know that this is not a regular telling of the Frankenstein story that people are used to, because people will bring their own sort of baggage to it. And that's good and bad, because, you know, they might, you know, choose not to come because they think that they know the story already, and they don't. But then if they do come anyway, what happens is they bring that baggage in, and now they're challenged, and they get to take the box, the prism that which you're looking at the story through, and we're just going to cant it just a little bit to the left, and a little bit to the right, and a little bit upside down, so that everybody who thinks they know the story gets to have that challenge to themselves. It's pretty cool.
I think that's going to be a lesser challenge than you think, thanks to Hammer Films and Peter Cushing becoming the face of Dr. Frankenstein as of the 50s. The character itself has so much more persona, so much more reality. So I think people are clamoring for something like this, to see yet the next level of the creator. And it's interesting you talk technology, because we're all creators now. We all have these software in our hands. And so to see what it meant to be a creator 100 years ago is pretty fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. And Victor Frankenstein was certainly a man ahead of his time. And we know what can happen to people like that. People who try to buck the trend, or, you know, bring science to a front that society is not ready for. And sometimes they can be accepted, and sometimes, you know, it just goes by the wayside.
And speaking of ready, you now have your own space. You're readying a new space with a new play. Oh, good. Why don't you give yourself more to do?
I thought, you know, who needs sleep, right?
Yeah, really. Exactly. So someone once wrote to me and said, "I'll sleep when I'm dead." I was like, "Okay, I'll take it."
Exactly. I'll sleep when I'm dead, and then Victor will resurrect me.
And then you'll do the show again. This is developmental, so he can do it again. How's the new space? You're coming into this new space. How is it to take your marvelous company and put it into this new space? You're part of a collective there, so you're part of many different companies in this space.
Right. It's the West End Theater Consortium within the Church of St. Paul and St. Andrew. It's on 86th Street, right off of West End. So it's like at the one train stop at 86. It's like half a block away. So that part, from a practical point of view, is just perfect. But from a architectural and design point of view, I mean, it couldn't have happened at a better time, because the architecture of this church is just amazing. And this space that they have, I mean, the church is huge. And this part that we're in has been used as a theater for decades, I think, you know, so it's not in the sanctuary of the church. It's this other place, but it's pretty large, and it has this amazing dome, and the back wall is curved, which is just perfect for us. It just has this sort of Gothic-esque feel to it that I think really serves as this most beautiful setting for our jewel of a play, if you'll.
I was going to say, so let's see now. You're moving into this beautiful Gothic theater that is actually a theater. You're not having to move anything around or cover anything up. So you're moving into this gorgeous Gothic theater to put on this gorgeous Gothic play. Okay, well, that's a happy coincidence right there.
You know, sometimes you speak something out to the universe, and then things just start rolling into place, and it's kind of amazing how it all came together.
Oh, I believe that completely. So now here's an interesting question. Whenever I speak to people about off-Broadway, when I speak to them about independent theater, they all imagine Midtown. Downtown is this cutting edge. Oh, you're downtown. Oh, you must be cutting edge, whatever. It's that stereotype there. Well, they think, okay, indie theater, okay, that's all Midtown. We're going probably from about 38th Street to somewhere in the 50s, and that's it. You're up in the fashionable Upper West Side. How does that feel? Is that a what's the feel? What's the vibe of doing a show up there?
So one of the most amazing things is that I think the way we think of artists living in Brooklyn or the Lower East Side these days, there was a time when they were all moving up to the Upper West Side because that's where the artists could go, right? And that's where they could afford to live. Well, they stayed there. So there is so many artists up there with painters and singers and other theater people that the vibe couldn't be more welcoming. There is a bar across the street because there's always a bar across the street from every theater.
Of course.
And they have just been amazing. And every time you go in there, I meet 4 more artists around. Symphony Space isn't far away, so there's a lot of art going on. And this church, the church of St. Paul St. Andrew, I'm not necessarily advocating for a church, but they are amazing in their social outlook and their mission. And so they have spaces all over the place for artists to do things within that within their church. It's part of their mission statement to include artists in the outreach within their local society and their larger society. So the vibe is really welcoming and challenging because if you're going to have a bunch of theater people in your audience, they're going to have some standards that they want you to meet.
Yes.
So we're looking forward to meeting and hopefully exceeding those standards.
I'm glad you said that about standards. Now, firstly, I'm thrilled to hear that about the church. My encounters a lot of times with religious organizations that house theaters is they're somewhat exclusionary. They do it for all the wrong reasons, and the actors don't necessarily profit by it. I'm so glad you're not in that situation. You're in one that understands the value of art. Now
we scoped that out before we agreed to move in as part of the consortium. That was a worry that I would have as well. But they have been nothing but open arms and saying, you do you.
That's great. Now, what did you mean when you said standards? Rise to their standards. What's the standards you're rising to? What are you looking at?
Well, with theater people, they know what you're doing, and they have a body of work behind them that they bring into the equation. And so I think that their standard of telling a story and their expectations of what you can do are typically higher than a regular audience member. And so I try to set my sights to win those people over as well, to bring them into the mix as well, because they're going to have higher expectations, and the higher we can go, the more of a challenge it is for us. And when we strive to meet that challenge, then we're just constantly exceeding our own expectations. It pushes us with telling the story, with the staging, with the use of the production values. We're going to start telling the story from the street. Posters and the program isn't going to be like any program you've ever seen. It's going to be a lot more about medical notes. Let me just
that's so cool.
Throw that little teaser out there. So it starts at the street, and the whole world is going to be sucking you into Victor's story.
Now you say standards. The standards. I'm thinking your neighborhood there. Yes, Symphony Space. You're also uptown from Lincoln Center. You're also you're just in a very high class section of town. Do you think you can woo in that audience? Do you think you can woo in that neighborhood?
Oh, I think so.
Excellent.
Absolutely. I plan to do that. I think that sometimes, how to say this nicely, sometimes people can have an impression of what off or indie theater is, as being, 3 black boxes and, 2 lamps to light it up that somebody brought from their house. And
right.
And we have progressed so far past that, and by we, I mean the whole independent theater scene. There's so many people who are using projections and video and amazing new lighting techniques and technology that now fits in the palm of our hand for so many things that I think that a lot of people are going to be surprised by what they get to see on that stage and how they'll see the use of that space in a way that they perhaps haven't in the past. You know, the set that we're building kind of goes up and arches over the top of the stage a little bit, and that's where some projections will be shown that you won't even know where they're coming from.
That's
So
great.
I think it's just going to be fascinating to everybody, and I hope that the technology fascinates them for the 2 minutes that they're sitting before the show starts, and then I hope they forget all about it and get sucked into the story.
So you're taking a classic character and turning it on its sewn together ass to create yet a new story of Doctor Frankenstein. You are taking all of this into a Gothic theater that you're putting projections into, so that the audience is going to see great pillars, and on those pillars we're going to see projections and all of this. And you're doing it in a neighborhood that is used to the symphony, the opera, and the ballet. How are you? Seriously, how's it going for you? Now you're leading this ship onto this golden shore. How's it for you?
I find I keep using the word amazing, but it really is. I mean, it is challenging. Don't get me wrong. I spend a fair amount of each day stressed out trying to get all the ducks in a row. But it's because we always try to do it. We're always pushing the envelope. I know that sounds like an old-fashioned phrase, but it applies in this. And when we go to the symphony, when we worked at Symphony Space before, last year we learned from those places, and we let them challenge us and make us better, and then we're going to bring our own brand of what we do to show them how we can challenge them as well. And I think it's going to be very complementary to what the Upper West Side already had. I think that we're going to be able to give them a slice that's maybe missing in that area, but also something that supplements what everybody else is already doing there. We're gonna fit right in and then poke our heads up above the water line a little bit.
That's gorgeous. That is absolutely gorgeous. That's exactly what I thought you were going to say. It's great that you're walking into that tone, but you're going to actually raise. You're going to add more notes to the symphony that's already up there.
Perfect. Yes. We're just going to add our own brand of notes. You know, we're not trying to shoot out at anybody. We like to work together, and I think it will be. I don't know. I just really think people are going to be amazed when they see this production. And I know I'm biased, but heck, it works for me.
You're supposed to be the artistic director. Hello.
Exactly. Yes.
How is it getting the actors into this type of frame? Because they come with the same stereotype, if you will, of the Frankenstein monster and everything they've seen. How do you? Was it an easy feat? Is it difficult? Because you're also directing this, yes?
Yes, I am. I wouldn't let anybody else do this one. This one had my fingerprints all over it from day one.
Well, of course, you had 15 minutes each day. You might as well put it somewhere.
That's right. There you go.
How is it to lead them into this?
You know, one thing is, on one hand, it's kind of a crash course for them because, you know, I've been working on this play for a year and a half, you know, and I've watched it go through different iterations, and I've come to know these characters in this world very well. And so then these actors end up walking into it, you know, with 6 weeks to mush all that together. But I always say that at the beginning of rehearsal, I know so much more about the characters than the actors do. And then halfway in between, like right about now, they start knowing so much more about their characters than I do. which is great because then I get to explore the whole big package of what the story is, and they start bringing all of their interpretations to it as well. So it's theater. It's just a multi-layered project that just keeps getting more and more complex as it gets simpler. The storyline gets simpler as it gets pulled together and everybody gets on the same page, but it's more nuanced, it's more layered. And yes, they absolutely brought their own understanding and baggage of what Frankenstein is. But these are skilled professional actors, and they know that they come in and you kind of have to wash your hands of that and accept that you're walking into a world that has its own criteria, its own parameters, its own rules, its own beliefs. And, you have to walk in there. John Blaylock, who plays our Victor Frankenstein, has to toss off a lot of that baggage and say, this is me. I am, these are actual lines at one point. He says, I am a man. I am a scientist. I have my own story that needs to be told, and I need you to hear it.
Wow.
And so the actual act of an actor casting off baggage is exactly what the character is trying to do to the audience.
That's just what I was thinking when you had quoted it, yes. Victor Frankenstein brings together the only group of people he feels will understand him, and that's his colleagues, his doctors, his scientists, the other people who understands facts. And he says, I'm going to tell you my story because you will believe facts where most people believe fiction. And there are lines in this play that are so very apt for today. He says, I'm trying to find this actual one, but this actual line, but he says on there, to the people of London, fact no longer mattered when fiction was more fascinating. Isn't it amazing how people are drawn to the crude, the base, the fabricated more than truth? Now, if that's not speaking to today's society, I don't know what it is. I am not. I can't. The moment you said it, I got chills because we're living in the world of fake news and alternative facts. We're living in the world where a TV host is running the country and the world. So wow, that's I've always said that the horror genre are cautionary tales. We need to look at them like we look at Greek tragedies, and the stories that you hear in them are basically what's going on around us, just overdone, if you will. And it sounds like you have found the perfect cautionary tale with Doctor Frankenstein.
It is the mundane made mythic, and then reduced back down when an audience interacts with it and takes that information home with them. And says, oh, yeah.
And there's the articulate mission right there.
Yay! We come full circle.
Okay, now, coming full circle, I've spoken to a lot of people today. Today's my day for interviews. I've spoken to a lot of people today, and somehow I've managed to get this one question in because it seems every conversation leads to it somewhere. What drives you? I'm theater, from what I'm told, doesn't make a lot of money, and it's usually jobs of thousands done by just a few people. What drives you with all that stuff behind it? What drives you? Why do you do it?
It is it's going to sound corny, but it is just the love of story. And the knowledge that telling a story to a bunch of people in the same room, under the same light, for that moment in time, they're all sharing their space with you, then it's not about what they read or what they believe of X people generically. They are there with you, breathing the same oxygen. And now we're interacting, and now we're sharing a story. And then they walk out, they go to the bar across the street, and they talk about it. and it grows and grows and grows. We always say that the story just never ends when the lights come up at the end. You know, the story, the whole purpose of the story then is to be continued out into a conversation, into the world. And that's what drives me is at a very small level, it is when I stand listening to an audience while they're listening to the story. And it's not applause, it's not laughter, it's this little sound that an audience will make when they're hooked, and they just kind of lean forward and they go, ah. It's just this little tiny gasp when they recognize themselves in a storyline somehow. And then when they're arguing as they're going out the street, no, he was saying this, it meant this. No, she said that, it meant that. That's what I love. That's what drives me.
You are a high priestess in the theater.
Sorry?
You're a high priestess in the theater. You're. It's funny you're in a church, because your mission is to present these well staged sermons and educate us about ourselves.
I'm not sure I feel comfortable grabbing the title of high priestess, but I do love the thought of being a communicator. You know, one of the definitions of the word articulate is that kind of a hub, that point where two independent things come together in order to move in different ways. Like where your elbow is, it moves two different bones. That's how you articulate. And so we've always used that as a reference to the fact that we use our talents and our resources to articulate a story from a page to a stage, and then connect it with our hubs, we connect it to an audience. And then they articulate it out into the world. So it starts way back with George and a piece of paper, and it ends, I don't know where, but certainly not at the stage door, as it keeps going out into conversations. And a year from now, somebody says, wow, you remember when we saw that Frankenstein thing, and that guy said that? I remember that really, really well. It stuck with me. That's the connective tissue.
I was going to say, and that's the magic. And that's the magic in magic realism. That's great. Kat, it is always a pleasure to speak to you. I will be in that audience. I'm sorry. I've seen every Frankenstein movie or anything. So to not be there is sacrilege. So I must be there at some point. I wish you all the best with it for opening, which is next week. I'll make sure our listeners know exactly when it's happening.
8th.
That's correct. And I'll make sure where they need to go and how to get there, and that they shouldn't stop at 42nd Street. They need to go up 40 more blocks to your amazing theater.
That's right, and it's an easy ride. The one train opens up right there.
Indeed. Have a great time with this. I look forward to seeing it, and thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks so much for calling.
My pleasure. Ciao.
Take care.
While the vein is thinnest, look for my interview with Chris Williams next on In the Dark, in the Passion Pit. Let's exit to the music of my favorite monster film studio, Hammer Films. And what's the movie? The Curse of, wait for it, Frankenstein. Till next time, on behalf of all the ghosties and ghoulies and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, I'm Jay Michaels.